Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is the tutorials. Today I'm going to be doing a chapter by chapter summary of the novel Wuthering by Emily Bronte. Chapter by chapter summary of the novel Wuthering by Emily Bronte. If you haven't read the novel, this video will help you understand the full story of the novel. And if you have read it or you're trying to read but you are finding it difficult to understand it due to the diction of the novel, this video will also help you understand the story of the novel fully. All I need you to do is to click on the like button, share the video to your friends, and please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Now let's get to it. The novel Wuthering by Emily Bronte is a 34-chapter novel set in the suburb area of England. The novel starts with a visit of the tenants of a place called Thrushcross Grange, which is owned by the landlord of a house known as Wuthering Mr. Heathcliff. The new tenant, Mr. Lockwood, describes Wuthering which is where Mr. Heathcliff lives, as a misanthropist's heaven because of its seclusion from the bustling of the city and its quietness. As he enters Wuthering his horse was stabled by one of the domestic staff, Mr. Joseph. On entering the lobby, he noticed the kitchen was separated from the living room, unlike what you have in other parts of England. He was offered a seat by his landlord, Mr. Heathcliff, and as he sat, Mr. Heathcliff called Joseph, who answered from a different room but did not make an attempt to come to his master. Then Mr. Heathcliff went to meet him. As he left, a dog came around Mr. Lockwood, who was seated. He moves it away and pushes a table before him to block himself from the dog. As he touches the table, other dogs came on him. He battled with them and shouted for help. The housekeeper fought the dogs to calmness with a frying pan and her voice. When Mr. Heathcliff came out, Lockwood expressed his dislike at Mr. Heathcliff, leaving him with wild dogs. Mr. Heathcliff said the dogs wouldn't have attacked him if he hadn't touched anything, and asked if he was beaten. Mr. Lockwood said he would have killed the biter if he were. Mr. Heathcliff offers him tea and starts a conversation with him. Chapter 2. Mr. Lockwood set out to visit Mr. Heathcliff a second time, as he promised him during the first visit. The weather was snowy, and as he reached the entrance of Wuthering and knocked, nobody came to open the door. He was outside till the snowflakes became thick, and he began to feel very cold. He knocked vehemently. Then Joseph peeped out the window and told him to go back. He kept knocking until Heraton came from another entrance and asked him to follow him. On entering the house, he was glad for the fireplace, which helped to make him warm again. He saw Mrs. Heathcliff, Mr. Heathcliff's daughter-in-law, and tried to start a conversation with her, but she rebuffed him. He kept trying until she began to speak with him. He discovered that Mrs. Heathcliff is not a mean person, as she had made him believe. When Mr. Heathcliff arrived, he said Lockwood shouldn't have come in the weather. He ordered that tea should be brought to Lockwood. Soon it was time for them to eat. It was time for dinner. The dining table consists of Heathcliff, Heraton, Mrs. Heathcliff, and Lockwood. As they ate, Lockwood tried to know about Mrs. Heathcliff and Heraton, and Mr. Heathcliff told him about them. After meal, Mr. Lockwood wanted to go back to the Grange but couldn't due to the snow, and Mr. Heathcliff warned he would be lost if he attempts going back to the Grange at that time. Since Lockwood couldn't get anybody to help him with the direction to the Grange, he had to sleep over in Wuthering Mr. Heathcliff told him he would share a bed with Heraton, as he doesn't keep rooms for visitors. He asked to be allowed to sleep in the living room on the chair. Mr. Heathcliff refused, saying he won't trust a stranger when he is off guard. He felt really insulted, that is, Lockwood felt really insulted and decided to go in the snow. As he got out of the house, he discovered that it was already dark and he seized the lantern that Joseph was in to make the cow, and Joseph shouted that he had stolen the lantern, and 2 dogs pounced on Lockwood. He was saved by Zillah after his attempt to get help from Mr. Heathcliff failed. He was taken to the kitchen by Zillah, who nursed him. He was left with no option than to accept lodging in Wuthering Heights. Chapter 3. Zillah took him to a restricted chamber to pass the night. She told him not to shout or make noise in order not to wake Mr. Heathcliff, as he had restricted everybody from entering the room. Lockwood seized the inscription of the names Catherine Henshaw, Catherine Linton, and Catherine Heathcliff. He read some books and diaries in the room, then lied down to sleep and had a series of nightmares. When he woke up from his sleep, he began to hear a wailing voice calling him to let her in. He looked out the window and saw the face of a baby. He struggled with the creature till he shouted and drew the attention of Mr. Heathcliff. He told Mr. Heathcliff, who took him to the haunted chamber, as he didn't care if he was going to send the person out of the house as he had threatened. Mr. Lockwood refused to go back to bed and decided to walk round the house till daybreak. As he was leaving, Mr. Heathcliff entered the haunted room and asked the fiend, that is, Catherine, to come in. Then a heavy wind blew into the room and Heathcliff cried. When day broke, Lockwood met Heraton, who was busy cursing everything he sees, and he showed him the exit way. As he was leaving through the door that Heraton had pointed, he came out to the kitchen and saw the housekeeper, Zillah, busy with her job, Mrs. Heathcliff reading beside a hearth, that is the fireplace, and Heathcliff having a confrontation with Mrs. Heathcliff. When they noticed that Lockwood was there, they stopped quarreling, and Heathcliff accompanied Lockwood to the entrance of Grange. Lockwood promised never to visit the Wuthering Heights ever again. Chapter 4. In Thrushcross Grange, Mr. Lockwood decided to find out about Mr. Heathcliff and Wuthering Heights from his housekeeper, Mr. Stein. The housekeeper began telling him the history of Wuthering Heights, as she had worked there since the age of 18. She narrates how Mr. Heathcliff came to live in Wuthering Heights. According to her, he was picked up as an abandoned child by Mr. Earnshaw on his visit to Liverpool. Mr. Earnshaw, the master of Wuthering Heights, gave the baby to his wife to nurse, but she was not happy about it, and her children, Catherine and Hindley, including her, the housekeeper, were against it. They hated the baby because he is the reason their father lost the gift he brought from Liverpool for them. Mr. Dean kept him on the ground in the night, hoping he would wander out of the house and someone might possibly see him and peek. Mrs. Dean was suspended briefly for her humanity to the baby. When Heathcliff grew up, he noticed that Earnshaw loved him a lot, and sometimes he tried to take advantage of it. For example, the time he told Hindley to exchange his horse with his own. Else, he would tell Earnshaw that Hindley beat him, and also said he would throw him out of the house if Earnshaw dies. But Hindley didn't succumb to his threats, rather, he beat him again. Chapter 5. Hindley's misbehavior became too much for their father to bear. The curate advised he be sent to the college, which Mr. Earnshaw obliged with heavy spirit. Mr. Earnshaw fell ill, and Joseph seized the opportunity to saddle him with a lot of sermons about his soul and encouraged him to be strict to his children. Mr. Earnshaw was very much influenced by Joseph's continual sermon, that he became very strict to his children and would reprimand them at every little thing, including jokes. Catherine became naughty due to the father's recent behavior, and she would make trouble and insult everyone. She was very close to Heathcliff, and Heathcliff would always do her biddings at any time. Cathy wondered why their father had changed since he became sick. After making troubles during the day, she would go to their father at night to make up for her misbehavior, but her father would rather rebuff her, telling her to go ask God for forgiveness, which Cathy wouldn't do. One night, they were all seated beside the fireplace, Mr. Earnshaw sitting on a chair stroking Cathy's hair, who was leant on his knee, and Heathcliff lying on the floor with his head on Cathy's lap. Later, Joseph went to wake Mr. Earnshaw to pray and go to bed. Then they discovered he was dead. As they cried, Joseph reproved them for crying for a saint in heaven. The children managed to console themselves with soothing words of Earnshaw being in heaven. Chapter 6. Mr. Hindley returns home for his father's funeral with a woman whom he introduces as his wife. The lady was very nice to Catherine and admired everything in the house but despises Heathcliff due to his color. Heathcliff has black eyes and hair. After a word envisaging his dislike to Heathcliff, the hatred Hindley had on Heathcliff was aroused. Hindley set Heathcliff to work at the field with the curate and stripped him of all his privileges as a son in the family. Heathcliff took his degradation in good faith, because Cathy was always there to spend time with him in the field. One day they were sent out of the house, that is, Catherine and Heathcliff were sent out of the house for making noise, and they went wandering to Thrushcross Grange. They peeped and saw Nanton and Isabel sad after quarreling with each other. They laughed and made noise, which frightened the occupants of the house, and they thought they were robbers, and set a dog against them. Cathy was badly beaten by the dog until Heathcliff succeeded in setting her free from the beast, that is the dog. They were led into the house, and Heathcliff was examined as a robber. Until Nanton recognized Cathy. They asked Heathcliff to go, but he refused to go without Cathy until he was forced out of the house. He stood outside, watching to see if Cathy wanted to go back to Wuthering Heights that night, but saw that she was well taken care of and didn't want to go. So he set out to Wuthering Heights in the rain, with the lantern he was given, at the Grange. In the morning, Mr. Nanton visited Wuthering Heights and admonished Hindley on how he should rule Wuthering Heights. Hindley threatened to dismiss Heathcliff if he ever speaks to Cathy again. Mrs. Earnshaw, that is Hindley's wife, undertook to make sure that Heathcliff doesn't ever speak to Cathy again. Chapter 7. Cathy stayed at Thrushcross Grange for 5 weeks and returned to Wuthering Heights, an elegant, beautiful and refined lady. On her arrival, she asked of Heathcliff, and as soon as she saw him, she went straight to him, hugged him, and kissed him severally before she even noticed and commented on how dirty Heathcliff was. Heathcliff was cold towards her and would not even shake hands with her. This disturbed Cathy, but Hindley and his wife enjoyed the scene and asked Heathcliff to give a handshake to Cathy, but he refused and left the house. He went straight to the stables, and Nanny met him carrying on with his normal activities and asked him to come and have a wash, but he refused and said he will be dirty and likes to be dirty. Hindley invited the Lintons for a party in Wuthering Heights to thank them for their kindness to Cathy. The invitation was accepted on the condition that Heathcliff, whom they referred to as the swearing boy. He kept away from Cathy. Heathcliff later came to Nelly and asked her to help him look good. Nelly did and also gave him food. When the natives arrived, Heathcliff made to come out and was intercepted by Hindley, who ordered him to stay in, else he would lock the door with a long lock, and Linton said that the lock was already long enough. Then Heathcliff, who hates Linton and sees him as a competitor, took a tureen of sauce and threw at him. Heathcliff was then locked up in a corner of the house. The Linton's family and the Wuthering had fun as the Jamestown came and also sang for them. The house was full of people. Then Cathy escaped to see Heathcliff. She asked Nelly to help Heathcliff out of the place, and Nelly did, and took him to the kitchen, where he sat pensively thinking of how best he would revenge Hindley. When Nelly asked him to leave it to God, he said God would not have as much satisfaction as he would if he did it by himself. Alright guys, this is where we'll end today's video. I'll be uploading the remaining chapters and other videos. Please click on the subscribe button so that once I upload the remaining chapters, you'll be the first person to be notified. Do not forget to share the video to your friends and please click on the like button. Before I say goodbye, please I want to apologize for the audio quality of this video and I promise to improve on it in the next videos. Please click on the subscribe button, very important, do not forget to do that. Thank you and bye for now.